Welcome everyone to Zoom into Books. We're really excited this morning. We've got Beth Werner with us today. She is the founder and president of Author Connections. So if you are a published author, a wannabe author, a first-time author, this is going to be a wealth of information for you. So right now I'm going to hand it off to Beth.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. We're just on the cusp now. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to Kathy for having me. I have been running Author Connections. I started this company about 10 years ago. We just celebrated 10 years in October, which is a milestone I didn't even know I would reach. And what I basically do is editing and marketing for authors and independent publishers. And whether it's fiction or nonfiction, adult or children's, whatever stage of the process people are up to when they just, when we connect and find each other, I can usually either help myself. Good afternoon. We're just on the cusp now. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to adults or and I can usually either point people in the right direction or help directly myself. So I'm very excited to be here with Kathy today, and we can answer any questions that you guys have.
Thank you, Beth. You can take what you are looking at on the screen right now is Beth's contact information, and we will put this up again at the end of the Zoom into Books session. So if you want to stop sharing, I think a good question to start with, Beth, is what's the most common mistakes that first-time authors make? Let's start with that.
Yeah, I think, there are a lot of things that you discover as you go throughout the process. So I tend to shy away from mistake because that can feel harsh. But at the end of the day, there are learning curves. And, we say hindsight is a beautiful thing because going in, there are things we just don't know. So I would say in terms of pitfalls or things that you want to try to avoid, when you're writing the book, try to think about who you're expecting to read the book. Marketing really begins in product development. So by all means, if you have a story or nonfiction information that you're compelled to share, be true to what you're looking to create. And I'm not saying to alter or change your material or your content. But at the same time, I do see a lot of authors write a book, invest a bunch of money, get it edited, have everything finished. And then you ask about marketing, or they are ready to approach trying to sell this book that's finished. And they haven't even given a thought to who the readers might be. So that's something you want to do as early on as possible when you're planning a book and thinking about what you're writing. Again, be true to yourself and what you want to share, but take into consideration, who am I doing this for and who is most likely to embrace it so that you can keep them in mind as you're creating for them. That's one big one.
It's so true. I know that the major publishing houses work a year in advance for a marketing plan. Can you speak to the difference between indie authors and major houses?
For sure. Well, with traditional houses, there are pros and cons on every side of this equation. So with traditional publishing, the beauty is they have all of the resources and the professional skill sets under one roof, and you can write the books and don't have to worry about all of the nuts and bolts of actually publishing. What's ironic, though, is that publishers, the big houses especially, are notoriously absent when it comes to marketing. So they will certainly put you in their seasonal catalog. If it's a book where they really feel they expect to sell subsidiary rights like movie rights or foreign translation, they tend to put a bigger push behind those titles that they anticipate will have better profit margins for them. But the vast majority of titles don't necessarily sell thousands of copies and don't get the marketing push from the houses that a lot of authors hope and expect. So that can be a rude wake-up call. when people go to the trouble of writing the book and they're super excited because they actually got an agent or got a publisher directly or whatever the case may be. And then they find out that, yes, they have a book and it's wonderful, but nobody knows about it and nobody has a reason to care. And they go to the publisher and say, well, what are we doing to promote this book? How are we going to sell the book? And the lesson is publishers love for books to sell, but they don't love to sell books. They are very good at creating books and making people aware that they exist, but they're not thinking about your target audience. They're not putting in the day-to-day or week-to-week effort that really is required if you want to tap into the potential for commercial success. It is an ongoing effort. And on the independent side, again, pros and cons, you do have a lot more work. There's no question. Independent authors who choose to become their own, self-published or independently published, you can tap into resources and professionals who will help you. You don't have to, full on self-publish or do everything on your own. But at the same time, you are sort of the general contractor. You're driving the bus. So you have a lot more control and you get to choose, and you own all of the rights. There are specific advantages. You control the timeline, which is another big advantage, but it means you need to do the homework and you need to know who your audience is and figure out how to reach those people and where and what message will resonate. There are stages and steps, which is why I always stress planning. Planning is everything. It's very difficult to go into something daunting that's got a lot involved, a lot of steps involved, a lot of moving pieces. And especially if it's something you haven't done before and you take all of this on without really thinking in advance, taking a step back, looking at the bigger picture. What are the goals for the book? Who's the audience? What's the budget, if there is one? How can you stagger the budget so that you're not investing more than you have to, but you're not compromising the book's chances? There's a lot of different factors. And one of the things that I've mentioned that I think has been helpful when I've, taught classes or spoken at events and conferences is once you sort of flip the switch and you shift from being the writer, creator, author to being the publisher, or being, working with a publisher very closely where you have a say in what the final outcome is, you kind of need to put on a business hat. Now it's not so much the artist in you. Now it's the publisher in you. And it is a different mindset. A lot of writers are not very comfortable selling. It's not something that they really are interested in. They really just want to write books. But at the same time, if you are hoping for people to buy that book, it is a commitment that you need to make. Otherwise, you're kind of just wasting time producing something that most people won't ever see.
That's so true. We do have a couple authors signing on now. I know.
Welcome, everybody.
A lot of authors think the hard part's writing the book.
And it is. It really is. It's not that the challenge of marketing and the business aspect of publishing, the fact that it can be overwhelming or daunting doesn't minimize how overwhelming and daunting writing a book can be. There's a reason why this is coveted. There's a reason why it's special. The last statistic that I read, maybe a couple of months ago, is 82% of the general population believes they have a book in them. People who have survived something out of the ordinary, or people who have lived fascinating lives, or maybe they just have incredible imaginations and they have this flood of stories and characters and scenarios that they feel compelled to put out there. Wherever the content is coming from, you want to do the best service to what you're producing possible. And these choices that you make along the way, if you can, again, like I said, take a step back and sort of plan ahead in advance, not only will it serve you well in terms of your chances for success, but it will be night and day in your stress management throughout the journey. If you go in head on and you're making decisions on the fly and you have a bunch of different options and opportunities coming at you, it's fun and it's interesting and it's all about your book. So it's not that this is negative, but Again, a lot of authors look back in hindsight after their first book or after the first year or two of their book, and they realize, oh my goodness, if I would have just taken the time, I didn't know about this one. I spent 1,800 on that one when I could have done it for 600. You know, there's just a lot of moving pieces, and it does make sense to get yourself educated about the marketplace like you would as a business person. You want to make sure that you know what you're dealing with, know who your competition is. Go to bookstores and the library and look at other covers in your genre. Look at the length of the books, look at what they charge, see if they have audiobooks or not. You know, there are a lot of different factors that sort of build your brand as a writer. And I just feel, this is me, the more prepared you are, the more informed you are, the better choices you'll make. And like I said, that not only ups your chances for commercial success, but it also helps tremendously with your stress level.
That's good advice. I know that with my publishing business, I have a couple authors who want to use pen names.
Mm.
Would you like to speak to that?
I have worked with, I shouldn't say many, probably a handful, 5 or 6 authors over the years that were using pen names for different reasons. And typically, it's not for fun. Typically, it's for a reason. So whether it's someone who is very involved in their community and a family person who happens to write erotica on the side, and they only want to reach that pocket of readers without their local community knowing, that's one scenario. Another that I have is I have a client who lost her husband very suddenly. She wrote a memoir called Sudden Widow. It's incredible, but her boys are still young. They lost their father. She's not ready to tell them yet that she's written this book. They're not young 4, they're young like 12. So old enough to get it, but not really old enough. She's not really ready for that. And they, you know, they live in a town and everyone knew the husband and, you know, whatever. So there are reasons why you sort of choose to separate yourself. I also have worked with authors who write different types of material. So much like a publishing house forms an imprint when they have a departure from the typical type of book that they publish. If you typically write fiction and now you have a nonfiction book, or let's say you wrote one book that's inspirational and then you wrote another book that's urban fiction, you know, very much a departure where they don't really jive, they wouldn't be marketed to the same audience. Sometimes a pen name helps you separate the brand so that each one is aligned with the content that you're offering. It does present challenges in marketing, you know, there's no question, because the first layer of audience building, your front line of promotion, are your innermost circle. It's your family and friends whom, you know, you're hoping will support you and share links and put the word out and attend, well, visit, you know, virtually attend a launch or whatever the case may be. When you don't have those people, if you're writing under a pen name because you really need an alias because you will not be tapping into your friends and family and community, it doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means that when you're anonymous, you're not you. So you're not tapping into the resources that would typically be a natural outlet of your promotion sphere. That doesn't mean it's impossible. So the way I suggest promoting when I'm planning a launch or a campaign is, and I don't want to go too far into this, but there are sort of 3 groups. There are 3 layers of outreach. There's group 1 is your innermost circle, friends and family. Group 2 is acquaintances, anyone you've ever crossed paths with at work or school or community or whatever the case may be. Not very close people, but people who would remember your name and recognize your name and think, oh, she wrote a book. That's kind of cool. Anyone who might be curious about that. And then group 3 is sort of the rest of the world. Anyone whom has been identified as your target reader based on the topic of the book and the genre of the book and people that are most likely to embrace and discuss and share what the book is about. So focus on the material. I find that if you stick with the book, what it's about, the layers of the story or the layers of value in the information you're sharing, if it's nonfiction, that's what will tell you very naturally and organically, this is who my readers are. people who care about this will be interested in my book. And you find those places of connection where you sort of cross paths of interest. And when you find that common interest, that's where you're going to be able to develop an audience, even when it's not in your own name.
We have a couple questions about pen names. Lisa from Facebook, she writes fiction and nonfiction. Her question is, should she brand differently with pen name?
Here's the thing, again, pros and cons. So there's no law. It's not required that you do this or set this up a certain way. It's really your preference. So if you're writing different, different segments of your writing, if they don't necessarily complement one another, if it's separate marketing efforts because they're different audiences, then for yourself, you'll need to sort of split your time, split your attention, split your budget if you have to be promoting in different places or with different messages. But it doesn't mean that you have to form a separate company or have a separate website. You also want to be conscious not only of saving money, because nobody wants to spend more than we have to, but also your bandwidth, your time, your energy. If you're a writer, you'd rather be writing. So again, the reason I always recommend a plan and taking a step back to look at the bigger picture is so that you can reduce the amount of time that you spend worrying about the business side. You sort of think about it, you devote the time to, okay, I'm going to figure this out. And then once you have a plan, a flexible plan, don't be rigid, don't put anything in stone, because things don't always go or hardly ever go according to plan. And again, my whole goal in life is stress reduction. So always be flexible with yourself. If you think something's going to take 6 weeks, leave yourself 9 weeks. You can always be excited if it's done sooner. Always build in cushion to whatever you're doing. If you think something's going to cost this much, anticipate it's going to cost 200 more, whatever it is. That way there's no last minute panic. There's no, oh my goodness, I didn't know this and now I don't know what to do. I'm not prepared. I try to avoid all of that. And in terms of the question, again, it depends on the topics. So if your fiction stories are, I always try to come up with extremes, so it's a good example. But if your fiction stories are, children's books, let's say, illustrated children's books, this is just hypothetical. And then your nonfiction is a book about, I always give this example. I think it's so, I'm going to be boring from repeating, but I just think it's a good extreme. If your nonfiction book is about preparing for a tax audit, that's a departure, right? You're not necessarily going to be melding those together. But even with that, you can still have a platform for yourself as a writer. And then within that platform or on one website, you can have one page for nonfiction books, one page for fiction, one page for children's books, one page for adult novel. You can split things up within the same little universe so that you don't feel like you have multiple ventures that you're managing. Again, it's all about the planning. If people are on the fly, and a lot of times it's from someone like myself, sometimes people go to a conference or they attend a program like this and they hear an idea and they think, oh yeah, I should do that. And they rush out and they do it and they spend money and they hire someone and they get all of this. And then they could find out later, oh, I could have just done it so much more simply. So my suggestion is, if you have the opportunity where you're still, a bit away from publication, or even if you're post-publication and you're revisiting how your marketing platform is set up, take all of these things into consideration, not only what's best for the book, but what your budget will allow for without it causing you stress. You don't want to commit financially. And I do see this time and again. Our first question was mistakes that people make. The biggest mistake I see people making is spending too much money. It's natural to be so excited when your book is done and you just want to put it out there. You want the whole world to know about it. It's proud, and you've earned it, and it's a lot of work and everything that went into it. But at the end of the day, you have to spend the money wisely, or you're just taking a match to your wallet. And there is a lot that can be done without spending. Technology has made it possible for us to reach hundreds, thousands, if not millions of people. So if you target correctly and you plan correctly and you know who you're going for and you know what your message is and you know how you're positioning yourself, none of that is stuff that costs money. That's just the time. It's the energy and the commitment that you make to setting up, okay, this is what I'm trying to do. This is how I'm going to do it. This is what I'm able and willing to spend to do it. Set it up. And then when you have that framework, like I said, you can be flexible. Any of the details in between can change, but it's very calming. And not only calming, but I think it instills confidence when you feel like, okay, I know what I'm doing. This is what I'm planning for this. And if it changes, that's okay. If something better comes along, I can still consider that. So along those lines, another suggestion, I wouldn't make a ton of advertising commitments way ahead. Some authors are spending a ton of money and they're investing in things before the book is even done. Put your plan in place and execute one step at a time, so that if you learn something in the early promotion efforts, maybe a group of people that you thought were going to be your readers are just not responding. And it's actually a different group of people. There's learning as you go. So don't make huge commitments to long-term marketing arrangements or spending a bunch of money. I always, even when I'm planning campaigns for my clients, even when I get approval on a budget for a full campaign, I never execute the whole thing at once. We do this month, we're doing these few things, and then this month we're doing these few things, because in marketing, it's all about test and measure. And then when you see something perform, then you can decide, okay, that worked, I'll do that again. And if you see something that doesn't do so well, it's like, okay, I learned that wasn't a fit for me, and I don't need to spend on that anymore. And you have the freedom to, again, being a business owner, you're a publisher, wearing the publisher hat, or working in collaboration with your publisher to make these choices. It's just a learning curve. There aren't so many ways to remove it. It's sort of just guiding you through it. And I do give a lot of advice, you know, even people who aren't my clients, a lot of times people just have questions. They're at a certain juncture. Should I go this way or that way? And I would say, again, be true to the book. Think about what the book covers, who your readers are, and how you're going to best serve them. And that will end up, hopefully, coming back to you in sales.
Excellent advice for sure. The target market is the most important thing, and you do need to be familiar with it before you take step one.
Yep, absolutely.
I'd like for you to talk to us about the most common editing mistakes, writing mistakes first-time authors make. And when do you advise them to go to a professional editor rather than their cousin?
Right. Okay, so here's the thing. Readers are readers. If you have beta readers, if you have friends, family, neighbors, anyone who's excited for you, maybe it's someone in your class or someone at work who hear, you know, you share that you're writing a book and they say, that's amazing, I would be happy to read it. All feedback is valuable. Anyone who will read the book and give you comments or ideas or suggestions, it may not always be something you want to hear, but you don't have to use what they say. You're in control. So that's the good thing. And I do recommend having people read and considering that feedback. However, I don't care how much they read, how smart and educated they are, how brilliant they are with language. If it's not an editor, they're not an editor. And so there are just things that an editor is trained to watch for, trained to look for. There are patterns that every writer has, different things that we tend to lapse into. Small things, subtle things. Maybe it's repetition of certain words throughout the manuscript. Maybe it's a tendency to start a lot of sentences with so or anyway. Again, little subtle things. Sometimes it's bigger things. Sometimes it's sequence. Sometimes it's the chronology of chapters. You know, again, there are stages to editing. We haven't really covered that, but editing is not just a one-step process. So there's structural developmental editing, story development. There's line editing, which is like structure of paragraphs and flow, where the pauses are. There's copy editing, which is tightening, making sure that there isn't syllables, it gets a little bit technical, but the rhythm, the flow, everything about the way the book unfolds for the reader's experience to keep those pages turning, those things matter, and it elevates the book to another level. So if you are doing a book that is a memoir, that you don't have a big budget, and it's sort of a legacy piece for your family, that you're not looking for commercial success, this is just something that you want to share, then you don't need to spend a ton of money on professional editing. I never recommend spending on something that you don't really have to have. But I will tell you that if you are a writer who is looking to tap into any level of commercial success, even if the average reader might not notice certain things that an editor will pick up on, judges of contests will notice, librarians will notice. If you have a dream of eventually attracting the attention of a traditional publisher or acquisition editor, they will notice. So there's a difference between the consumer marketplace and the professional industry. And if you want to be embraced by the professionals like the librarians and the booksellers and the contest judges, you need to be willing to take that book to another level. Otherwise, even if it's a wonderful story, if it's not polished, it's a manuscript. Now, the other side of that is you don't have to write a draft and rush to spend a bunch of money on an editor. So what I always recommend to my clients, which again saves stress, but it also saves money and it saves time, and there are other advantages, take the book as far as you possibly can on your own and then submit to an editor. And the reason for that is, unfortunately, and this is another mistake, authors sometimes make, they write a book and they feel like, I wrote a book, cleaning it up is not my job. Let the editor do it. And that's fine. But if it's a rough draft that you haven't proofed and you haven't read through and you haven't really fixed the little details and you haven't taken time to see, does this really work the best this way, or was it just me purging all these thoughts in my head? That's going to cost you a lot more for that edit. Whereas if you write your first draft and you take a step back for usually 2 to 3 weeks, a minimum, and then you read through it again after not looking at it for a while, you will catch things that you didn't even imagine. So there's a lot that you can do in self-editing. And not only does it save money and save stress and all these other things, it will make your final product that much more yours. If you submit a rough draft to an editor, there's nothing wrong with that. But the final product is sort of more of a collaboration. They had to do a lot more work to get it to where it needs to be. Whereas if you take it that much farther along and the editor is just polishing what you've sent to them, your name is the only name on the cover. That's something that I stress time and again. This has to be something that's your voice, that's your vision, that is representing what you're trying to say. And no matter how good an editor is, you don't really want them in your thoughts. You don't want them, building the furniture. They're only there to polish it. So that would be my suggestion. Take it as far as you can on your own. Find an editor who gets where you're trying to go, what you're trying to say. That's important. It's not only about language skills. Lots of people have language skills. Editing isn't only about grammar. It's someone who you feel a connection with, that when you explain where you're trying to go and what you're trying to do with this story or with this, nonfiction business book or self-help book or memoir, whatever, you want to feel that sort of, it's like a little bit of a rush when you're sharing your idea and your vision and someone really gets it and you feel like they can sink into helping you achieve this. That's what you're looking for in an editor. It is definitely a collaboration. I hope that's helpful.
That is very helpful. What are your thoughts between using a critique group? I know a lot of authors value friends' opinions, personal opinions of the quality, the line of the story. Speak to the difference of using the value of a critique group or not.
The problem with, well, not problem, the challenge with a critique group is that it depends on the group. You know, it really depends on the group. So I know some writers who have benefited tremendously. They have writer workshops or local, you know, right, or even online. There are groups on LinkedIn. The author writer groups on Facebook tend to be a lot bigger, like, you know, thousands and thousands of people. There are some smaller groups on LinkedIn that are a little bit more intimate. And I've seen many times writers saying, you know, I'll read for you if you read for me, or whatever the case may be. You can sort of go segments at a time. So while you're creating the book, you get feedback. It really, again, not only with an editor, but with your writer group, you need people that you can trust. You need people who are not going to spare your feelings. It's not about kindness. It's not, well, it's always about kindness. You don't want anyone who's going to be brutal or mean-spirited ever. I don't care who they are. Even if it's an editor or a publisher, they have no right to be brutal or mean-spirited. And some people are. We all know that. And if you get into a writer's group where you're really good and maybe someone else realizes they're not so good, there can be egos involved. There's, you know, there are so many factors in any social interaction. So first thing is find a group that's a good group. Read references, you know, read about what people are saying about the group that they're in, see who's open to new members or whatever the case may be. Find a group that's about your genre. You know, it's not always, it's not that it's not helpful. Sometimes it could be good to get someone who reads other type stuff altogether and just is going to give you their initial impression. Like I said earlier, I think all readers are helpful. I think all feedback is helpful, even if you don't end up using it. But at the same time, if it's people who are going to sort of become your advisory board, in essence, and they're fellow writers and peers who are going to help nurture you through the process, that's a mutual sort of exchange, then I think people in the genre who really understand where you're going, what's involved, others who have crafted similar books, those are the people who are going to get you. They're your people. Now, if you get into a group where you think they're smart and it seems like they know things that maybe you don't know and you'll benefit from learning, and that's always great. But I have had authors tell me from time to time that they joined groups, they were careful, they chose cautiously, they're all decent people, but they always feel crummy afterward. They just feel rotten. It doesn't boost their self-esteem. It makes them worry and doubt and question, which, you know, we all have enough of anyway. My bottom line is, if you're reaching out for something that's intended to be supportive and helpful, and you find that your energy is never positive when you're doing that activity or around those people, get rid of it. And it either means you need to find a different group, or maybe the group scenario is just not a fit for you. People take criticism differently. Some people have really strong backbone, really thick skin. They're confident in what they're writing, and you can say whatever you want to say, and they might take it under advisement, or they might say, you don't know what you're talking about. I'll do what I please. And that is your right, because again, it's your name going on the cover. But if you're someone who is, you know, it's kind of introverted and not always comfortable around other people, and now suddenly you have the vulnerability of sharing this thing that you've created from your soul, and if these people are potentially going to give you feedback that's not necessarily all glowing, and that's going to be damaging to you, you know, you have to know yourself. You have to have the self-awareness to recognize if it's something that's going to be, that you will be able to take well and use, or if it's going to be soul crushing. Don't set yourself up for that. There are a lot of things in the publishing marketplace that are recommended in certain cases, but it doesn't mean it's for everyone. So another example is a blog. You know, I hear a lot of authors saying, I was told that if I have a book, I have to have a blog. And, you know, I am a writer, but I want to work on my next book. And now I feel like I have to start this blog and I don't know what I'm going to say. You don't have to have a blog. It is not required. And there are certain people and certain books that a blog really can be important for. And it can be a very valuable tool in gaining audience and having a regular exchange and ongoing relationship with people. It's good exercise just as a writer. You're not writing a book every other week. You're not always in the middle of a manuscript. So to keep your chops fresh and be sharing your thoughts and, you know, kind of be out there, I'm not knocking blogs. But if you are a fiction author, you're much better off writing your next book than worrying about what 500 words you're going to produce this week on a topic that you don't really care about. Go with what speaks to you. Go with what you feel passionate about, what you feel like, oh, I could write about that all day long. I have so many thoughts in my head on that subject. That's when you know that you're where you should be. If anything feels like, why am I doing this? Or even if you started a blog, I know a lot of authors that have been doing a blog for, 2 or 3 years and they have 48 followers. Again, I'm not knocking it. If you find value in the exercise of writing and engaging with those 48 people, by all means, no judgment. But that's not your path to book sales. So again, it's two hats. You're wearing your writer, creator, artist hat, and you're wearing your business publisher hat. And even when you have a publisher, you should still keep that hat handy to put on, because you never want to relinquish all control to someone else. You are the creator. And so you need to think about where you want this to go and how you're going to get it there, regardless of who else is involved in helping you. I tend to go off on tangents, so I keep hoping that I'm answering the question.
You're doing a great job. Thank you. I think you touched on this earlier, but we've had another question about measuring whether your marketing is successful. And once you put that plan in place, or you start those ads, or whatever the avenue you choose is, how much time do you give it?
Excellent question. A fluid question, something that could probably be tweaked regardless of who you are and what you're doing. Like I said, I do believe in test and measure. I don't believe in flooding the marketplace with a bunch of advertising. A, because you don't want to multiply your spending. B, in answer to this particular question, because of performance measurement. So if you combine a whole bunch of efforts at one time, what happens is, if you see a boost or a spike in sales, that's fabulous. That's what you're looking for, but you don't necessarily know where it came from. So if I agree with being aggressive and, trying to be out there in a number of different places and hitting people from different sources, so that you do, when you're selling something, even if it's not books, whenever you're selling something, you want to come at it from all sides. You want those potential customers to hear you on the radio and see you on television and read about you on Facebook. And then it's like, wait a minute, what is this? I'm suddenly seeing this everywhere. That momentum, that's what instills curiosity. And that's what hopefully leads to sales. One thing to keep in mind is the point of discovery is not typically the point of sale. So it takes effort for people to even find out you exist and find out that your book exists. But even if someone hears about it, it doesn't mean they're rushing to buy it immediately. And that's any advertising. It's not just books. Advertising is about repetition. That's why they come up with the jingles, on advertising on television. We get these jingles that get stuck in your head. They want that. It's called mind share. You want people to remember and have that repeating in as many places as possible. But when you're just getting started, if you try to be everywhere all the time without doing that staggered test and measure first, like I said, you could get a burst of sales, which is wonderful, but you don't know which thing accomplished that for you. So what I recommend in terms of, and it was part of the question, the timeline, what I always say is, for the first, 6 months or so, do like 1 or 2 things each month. And you don't have to keep fancy spreadsheets or anything. It's not like you have to become some corporate, finance person, but you do want to kind of keep track. Okay, in September, I did these couple of things. How did my sales go? In October, I did this. How did my sales go? And you kind of look back, and then you know what worked and what didn't. And it may be to repeat again for this book. It may be something to tuck away for another book that's coming later. But you tend to get familiar with the different opportunities in the marketplace. And standards for measurement, there are sort of layers to this question. I want to make sure I address everything. So over time, you'd want to stagger, do a couple of things at a time, like I said, for spending, for measurement, etc. In terms of how you measure, it's not only in book sales. So again, sales don't necessarily come right away. There are intermediate levels of engagement. And typically, for example, if someone is following your blog, or they do like your Facebook page, or they do follow you on Twitter or Instagram, That's healthy engagement. That's someone who has said, yes, I like what this person is sharing. I'm interested in what they're talking about. Those people are definitely most likely to want to read your book, especially if they're following you for a while. And that kind of makes them feel invested in what you're doing, right? They're kind of along for the ride. And so I do suggest in social media, keep it focused on the books, but give of yourself. Be present. Don't just say, here's my book, read my book. What'd you think of my book? It's boring. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to hear that. But if you share part of your process, if you share snippets from the book with the page number, if you share different things that helped inspire what made you write this, or, whatever the case may be, that's sort of a voyeuristic invitation. It welcomes people behind the curtain. One analogy I like to give is I'm into photography. If I'm buying art for my home, I'm not necessarily looking to go to a department store and buy a print that they have 80 more in the warehouse. I want to go to a craft fair and buy from a photographer who paid $30 for his table for the day and get this once in a lifetime shot that he's selling there, that doesn't exist anywhere else. So it's just gauging. It's gauging what works best for the book and what works best for you. And those measurement standards are, if you do an ad on Facebook and your Facebook followers go from 87 to 300, that's a success. If you go to 1800, anytime your numbers go up in the following that you have, whatever platform or channel they may be, interacting with you. So if people retweet on Twitter, if they comment on things, if they like things, if they share things, those are all measures of marketing success. It means that you're getting out there, you're reaching people, they're responding to you. If you get an email with feedback about the book, anytime you get a review for the book, of course, reviews are a whole, that could be a topic unto itself. When you find that people are responding to you, not only is it a measure of a, level of engagement that what you're doing is working, but it is so rewarding. It is so rewarding when you go through everything that you go through to do what we're doing, when you produce a book and you're so proud and you don't know how it'll go. Even one person saying, I read that book, I love that book. I mean, to me, that makes your whole day. And even when I'm not the writer, even as the editor, when a book that I edited wins an award or, receives a tremendous accolade or somebody writes a glowing review, I carry that with me all day long. It means the work that you're doing, that is the picture of success. That at the end of the day, of course, no one complains about a royalty check. We're all clear that we want to sell books and the goal is to make money, but it's really not the only goal, and it's far from the only measure of success. The vast majority of writers that I have worked with have said, of course I want to make money, but it's not just about the money. People don't go into publishing to make money. People go into publishing for love of books, for love of the connection that it establishes with people we've never met before, for adding a layer to your legacy long after you're gone. This book will be here. Lots of books don't even really take off until years later. We can try to foster all these things and be a catalyst for all the things we're trying to accomplish, but there's only so much we can control. And we've all heard the stories of people that a book existed for 30 years and the author is gone, and now suddenly it picked up and it took off and they're making a movie. And, I always think, oh gosh, I hope they can see what's happening with this. We can't predict, we can just do our best. And the measures of success, if you want like a formula, I always feel like this will be disheartening, but this is really what I think about as at least a low point, a starting point. If you're publishing a book and your book has come out, for the first year, if you sell 30 copies a month, and that, I know it's not a wish list, it's not a big grand, fabulous level of sales, and even 30 copies a month, don't think it's easy. Doesn't always happen that way. And it won't happen the first month. Unless you started marketing way in advance and you have a network of people waiting for the book to come out, it's hard at the beginning. It's hard. If you can sell 30 copies a month by the end of your first year, if you're averaging that, not a financial windfall, but to me, that means you got a new reader every day. So if you average 30 copies a month and you got a new reader every day in your first year to 18 months as a published writer, to me, that's a success. That's a success. Someone new reading your book every day. And when you get to 5 people a day and 20, of course, we want everyone reading the book. We want, I want to walk through an airport. My dream, I travel. I like to travel. Not this year, of course, nothing is happening, but I'm a traveler. And so my dream has always been, if I could just walk through an airport and see people reading my book, that would be like the ultimate to me. Just to by random see someone holding my book in an airport, I think that would be the best. So we all have different ways that we measure success, and don't limit yourself to only one channel, because that can be very disheartening.
So true. So true. We do have a question from Brenda on Facebook.
Okay.
She wants to know if appearing and selling at local book fairs is worth the effort.
That's also a great question. So book fairs and events in general tend to be hit or miss, again, unless you do the planning correctly. So, and you, Kathy, certainly can speak to events and book fairs. I mean, you're the queen of doing events to support your authors and sell books. At the end of the day, I believe in events and book fairs and festivals because, especially now after 2020, that interaction, meeting someone, shaking their hand, if God help us, we can never shake hands again. That type of personal connection with someone, I believe that makes them remember you. That is something that if they meet you, and especially if you do have a connection, if you make them smile, if you make them laugh, if you make them think about something, they're going to want to read your book. It's just kind of a natural thing. I don't know. I don't think there's any scientific formula for it. I just think it's human interaction. If you meet someone and you engage with them and they make a good impression, you're curious about them. And if the whole reason you've met them is because they're there, because they're so proud of this tremendous thing they've accomplished, what's a book? $20? You know what I mean? Support them. Read the book. So I do think that they can be valuable, but again, it depends on the event and it depends on how you do it. So like the LA Festival of Books, one of the largest in the country. Texas does a big one. Miami does a big one. There are book fairs all over the country. Probably 50,000 people over the course of 2 days go to that LA Festival of Books. Typically, it's in April. I've gone many years. It's fantastic. It's amazing. It's all thousands of people about books, but not cheap. So if you have to spend $2,000 or $1,800 for just to have the table for 2 days, and then you add travel time and hotel and time away from work or your family and, having to be there all day. Not always the best. You're stuck. You're trapped at the table. You're not out selling. You're there. You have to hope people come to you. So think about the budget. Think about how you're going to make the most of it. Maybe you do the smaller local event instead of the big national event, where maybe there'll be 400 people instead of 50,000 people, but your cost will be $300 instead of, you know what I mean? You have to sort of put that business hat on, take a step back, look at your options, and plan what works for you. If you have written a book, let's say if a book fair is all about families and kids and they have a big entertainment stage and, it's this sort of just outdoor cultural day, and you have a very specific niche nonfiction business book, that's not really, I don't know, to me, that's not a fit. You would be better off going to business conferences, go back to your book. What is the book about? Who are your readers? Where are they? Where are you most likely to engage with them? You could possibly save a ton of money on going to events and join certain groups and network that way. You kind of have to figure out where you're going to reach your people and what makes the most sense. And when you do choose to go to an event, do things to make it positive. It's not, you don't want to just show up and sit there all day with your book. Have a banner, have signs, have a timed, a signed giveaway at 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. that you promote in advance and people have a reason to come to your table. There's ways to make it engaging. I feel like I keep repeating that word, engagement, but it is sort of a buzzword in what we're doing. because you're trying to attract strangers to have interest in something you're offering. And people could be walking by you, walking by you, walking by you, and then the one that stops, and the word is, if they engage you, that's a hot lead. That's a lot closer to a sale than the people who just keep walking. So you want to make sure that when you do events, you have the highest likelihood of more people stopping to talk to you, instead of masses that are just going to walk right by you all day. And you think, why did I just spend $3,500 to sit at this table for 2 days? You also have options with people like Kathy and programs like this, and there are others out there, where you don't have to spend all the money by yourself. You can go with your publisher or team up with other authors and share a table. So that way you're paying a fraction of the cost for those 2 days, and you split it between you. And then you have your slot to be at the table, but the rest of the day you can walk the festival and network and meet people that way. Again, it's all about the planning. It's how you set it up, how you collaborate, how you manage your budget. Team up with other authors in the same genre and tell them, well, I looked at this book fair, I can't afford it, but if the 4 of us do it together, then it's $500 a piece, and we each take a half a day. You know, that can be productive and worthwhile, and you're not going to kick yourself at the end. So yeah, there are so many ways to be out there. Just focus on what your book is about and who your readers are, to know where you need to be and what makes the most sense for you.
It's true. We also, I had a follow-up question to that about peripheral products pulled from your book. T-shirts, lunch boxes.
Oh, merch stuff. Okay, merch.
Yeah.
So again, think about the book. So if it's a children's book and it's going to be a series, or you have some characters that are going to, maybe it's not a series where it's an actual sequel or a continuation, but it's a body of work or a portfolio based on these characters, then by all means, have stuffed animals made, you can have your book cover printed onto individually wrapped cookies. There's all kinds of cute merch stuff that you can do. I think for kids, usually, because that's the kind of novelty stuff that children are drawn to. When it comes to adults, you really have to kind of get creative. So if it's a business book, think about the nature of the business. What are you offering? Maybe you offer something, either it's a discount or, you know, that's not exactly merchandise, but it's a perk. When I think of merchandise, I think of perks, right? So what are the bonus items, either physical, tangible items or a service that's provided, where they say, if you stop by our booth, you know, lots of people do this. If you come to our booth today at this event, then you sign and you get 10% off, you know, whatever the case may be. So offer signed copies of the book, offer limited edition signed hardcover copies. If you don't typically have hard copy and distribution, that's a very special thing to offer if people attend and see you at an event. You can certainly t-shirts, mugs, hats. I mean, those are pretty typical. But again, I don't know that I would spend a lot of money on that if it's not a fit. If it's not for children, or it's not a business thing that's tied to, you know, what's going to actually help people, probably not the best use of the money. I would use it more toward marketing collateral than merchandise. So I would have a great banner for any time you're making an appearance. I would, you sort of want to create your display, right? When businesses go to a show or go to an event, they have a display that they plan, that they think through. They prepare the signage, they prepare the cloth on the table. They set out exactly, like when I go to events, which I've been doing for a gazillion years, I always have candy and flowers. It's my thing. I always have candy and flowers on my table. Why? Because when you're hoping that people are going to come over to you and talk to you, you're wooing them. It's wooing. And there's nothing that makes people stop at your table more than a good bowl of chocolate. It's just that simple. I've seen trade shows. I've been doing trade shows for, 25, maybe 30 years. If you have the row of free pens, it's like, okay, yeah, nice pen, thanks. Usually tote bags do very well. Certainly at book fairs, tote bags are a big one because people have to carry the books. But they're not cheap. And you have to think about, as a publisher, if you're an independent publisher, do you have a logo? Are you a one title author? where there's no logo, there's no ongoing brand, but it's just this single title that you're promoting. Maybe you have the book cover printed on a tote. Again, I know I'm being redundant, but that's sort of the point. Always take a step back. Think about what you're planning. Think about the book, who your readers are. It's really simple even I'm hearing myself talking, it's the same things over and over again. So it's not as complex as it seems. There are just a lot of nuts and bolts to getting it to do what you want it to do. And I find it comforting that you can always sort of, okay, let me go back to square one. What's the book about? Who are my readers? Where am I most likely to reach those readers? And chances are, you've had this happen already, but once you're networking as an author and anyone in the marketplace finds out you have a book, we all know our world right now is governed by algorithms. So they will find you. You will get emails from everyone in the universe that says, oh, you have a book, want to market it here, you can promote it here, we'll tweet your book, we'll do, all day long. You better set your filters. And it can be confusing because some things sound pretty good. But again, you don't want to rush ahead and spend money and then find out that wasn't the best thing. So it's always taking a step back. Don't make rash decisions. Don't spend money on this if it was really planned for that. You have to consider, is this better than that? Think like a business owner, and then hopefully you won't regret any of the choices that you make. And if you do something and you spend some money and you don't sell a ton of books, don't beat yourself up. Like anything else, so you learned, so you don't use that one again. And I never recommend spending a lot. In this test and measure phase that I'm talking about, if you do an ad on Facebook, don't spend $200 on an ad on Facebook. Spend $15. The beauty of advertising online these days is you can get very low cost ads that you can do as a test. So if you set up an ad on Facebook for $15 for 24 hours, and I do these all the time, so I'm not guessing, this is what I do. And it doesn't always go well. I don't always tag it perfectly. Sometimes you get the tags right. I've had clients' Facebook pages go from 137 to 1,800 in 3 days for $50. You have to play with it. So you have to think about your marketplace, think about your tags. The tagging is really key. Your metadata, and again, that's a whole separate topic. But when you're thinking of hashtags and keywords and metadata, make sure that when you're discussing your book, when you're writing a description of your book, your primary keywords, not so much the title, hopefully your keywords are in your title or your subtitle, but with fiction, that's very hard to do. So you have to think about the book. I'm being so repetitious, but when you go back to it, there are layers. So if it's fiction, you don't only limit yourself to genre. Okay, maybe it's romance, maybe it's a mystery crime thriller, maybe, there's all these different genres. But even within that, what are the subplots? What are the layers of your story? What are the specific things that your characters go through that potential readers will relate to? So if you have a book that's about a middle-aged divorced woman, empty nest, those are your keywords. Divorce, middle-age, empty nest, because that taps into specific niches, groups of people who, regardless of what the actual story built around that is, there are people who say, yeah, that's me. I'm, 56, my kids are out, whatever the case may be. And that's just one example, but take any example you like. When you stick to being true to the story or the information you're sharing, and you're clear on who the groups of potential readers are, that's what's going to guide you to the right ways to reach them.
Good advice. We just have a couple minutes left. I'd like to, for you to wind this up with the effect that COVID-19 has had on authors, publishers, the industry. But we just have a few minutes, so let's end it on a good note. How can authors take advantage of what we have learned the last 10 months? And I think quite a bit. So
quite a bit. And I do want to be brief because I do see the time. I have to be careful because I don't want to get emotional. It's been a very tough year, just in every way, not just in publishing, just for humanity. It's been a tough year. And in the States in particular, there are so many other elements of, politics and election and race issues. And there are just layers and layers of what we're all coping with in our daily lives right now. And the beauty of it is we get to think about books. And that is an escape from day-to-day reality, or it's an expression of the reality that we're dealing with. And so hopefully that in itself is a positive. You've accomplished something that so many people want to do, think about doing, talk about doing, and it's a very small percentage that actually do it. So just the fact that you're here and you've come this far, you're a rock star, truly. And in terms of COVID, this program is a perfect example. Kathy has, on a dime, as a publisher, everything I've been talking about as a businesswoman, she recognized, and we did not discuss this before. I'm saying this completely off the cuff right now. She said, "Oh my God, I'm in business. I need to sell books. I need to support my authors. I typically do, I don't know, 30." She does so many events every year. And now all the events are going away. I mean, it's one thing to have one book and hope it sells some. It's another thing when it's your livelihood and there's all these people counting on you. So this program, Zoom Into Books, that we're on right now, is one of the best examples I've seen of taking something scary and overwhelming and unknown and unfamiliar and unpredictable and turning it into a positive. You throw yourself in, you learn what you need to learn, you get up to speed. There is some trial and error. There is test and measure. There are glitches that you'll overcome at the beginning. And then as time passes, you get better and better at it and people start to recognize it and engage. So in terms of advantages, not only for this program, but in general right now, the beauty of virtual, and there are a few, doesn't cost. You don't have to travel. You don't need dry cleaning. You don't have to go anywhere and take time away from family and work. You spend an hour at your computer and you can engage with all these people. That is a beautiful thing. And not everyone was doing that. Well, a lot of us were doing it already, but COVID has obviously just pushed us into this whole virtual communication realm to a level that none of us could have anticipated. And I think we're fortunate that the technology exists. I mean, think about if this COVID had happened 20 years ago, I don't even want to know. I don't even want to know. With no social media, everyone didn't have a smartphone. It's honestly unthinkable to be that detached. And for me, it's snowing outside my window right now. Once it's cold, I don't leave the house anyway. So if I didn't have a technology, I mean, I do. I adore my husband. I love my dogs. I have a happy home life. I'm very fortunate, but it would be very, very difficult to not be able to engage with people. So you do have the advantage of all these online groups and programs and networking. Tap into that. It's all about networking. Just keep meeting more people, getting more people aware of you, more people aware of your book. And that's really the goal at the end of the day, is discovery. And I'm wishing everyone the very best of luck. Stay safe, be kind, and sell books.
Thank you so much, Beth. And I want to be sure and let everybody know that they can get in touch with Beth at authorconnections.com. Her contact information is in the comment stream on the Facebook page. And there it is again. So thank you very much, Beth. I know there's a lot more we could do, and hopefully you will come back again.
Oh, I'd love to. I appreciate everyone who attended. And, Kathy, I kind of really do love you. So thank you for having me, and take care, everybody. Good luck to you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.